Good evening, friend. Set your mug where the warmth can find it, and let your shoulders fall. I am Snorelock Holmes, your guide through stories, histories, and dreams. Tonight our case is set in Pi-Ramesses, around 1250 BCE, in the reign of Ramesses II. The stakes are sharp and simple. A sealed dossier rumored to reveal secret negotiations with runaway slaves. If we do not find it before dawn, floodwater will erase it forever. The mystery will unravel. Who hid the papyrus of the two covenants, and where? Before we begin, tell me in the comments which city you're listening from, and which other historical mystery you'd like me to unravel next. We have a journey ahead, and you are safe here. Chapter 1. 2 Knots. East wind. I was in my lamplit study, watching the sharp reed of an old pen get its edge back under my small knife. The blade whispered against the reed. I trimmed the frayed end, turned the pen in my fingers, and felt the smoothness settle. On a saucer, powdered resins, frankincense, and a pinch of myrrh released a warm, faintly medicinal scent when my breath passed over them. I like to catalogue scents the way other people line up paperclips. Frankincense, honeyed smoke and pine. Myrrh, earth and orange peel. Glue from old bindings, sour sweet like damp wheat. Rain ticked against the window and sketched soft diagonals in the lamplight. I reached for a ledger to note a cross-reference about delta seals. It was a quiet, steady minute. Then a frantic knock splashed through the rain. I rose, breathing once more through the warmth, and opened the door. A courier stood before me, soaked to the skin. Mud clung to his ankles, and a reed case hung from a strap across his chest. His breath came in short, ripping pulls. He staggered 2 steps into the room, clutched at the strap, and collapsed onto the rug. "Easy," I said. I knelt and gently eased the case free. The strap's threads were tight with wet. Blue wax sealed both ends of the cylindrical case, and the wax bore a neat impression. 2 papyrus stems bound together with a double tie. The courier's eyes roamed, unfocused. 2 knots, he gasped, and then, softer, as if talking to the floor, Per-Atum, east wind. He coughed and shut his eyes. His hand fell open, palm up, as if offering nothing but water. Drips from his cloak made small constellations on the boards. I set the reed case on a cloth and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. His pulse was fast but steady. Rain rattled the window again, and the room felt like a hollow reed itself, full of night and waiting. I leaned closer to the seal. The double-tied stems were sharply cut, the kind of careful work an official sealsman would admire. In the lip of the wax, a small faience bead had been trapped, a tiny scarab, sky blue. That kind of accident is no accident. It's the sort of deliberate accident someone leaves as a signature. And there, tucked under a binding thread, a fragment of insect wing, delicate, amber, lattice-veined. A locust's wing, by the look of it. I slid a thin blade under a narrower strip of wax and lifted it enough to look for air bubbles. The wax base smelled faintly of Nile mud and acacia gum, blue pigment in a standard recipe used in the Delta administration. Good. The scent told a story of where the wax was mixed, not in a modern studio, but with river silt close at hand. I looked again at the courier. "You're safe," I said. "You did your part." He wasn't hearing me, but I said it anyway. The nervous make better choices when someone speaks the obvious out loud. A soft, fast set of steps sounded on the stair outside my door. The handle turned before I could reach it, and Dr. Layla Ben Yosef slipped in, breathless and rain-speckled. Her scarf clung to her curls, and her glasses fogged at the edges. She took one long look at the courier on my rug, then at the reed case in my hands. "Oh, thank God," she said, voice low and controlled, the way one calms a skittish horse. "He made it." "Come in," I said. "Your donor has a flair for drama." She closed the door behind her and stood a foot from the table, hands flat on her field notebook, composing herself. Her boots left wet prints. Even in that moment, she straightened a stray bead at her bracelet, a tiny scarab. I noticed it matched the one trapped in the wax. "What did he tell you?" she asked. "3 things, in 3 words," I said. 2 knots, Per-Atum, east wind. She exhaled. "Then the note was right about you." I nodded toward the kettle. "Tea?" "Yes, please," she said, though her eyes kept sliding back to the case. The rain eased, turned to a whisper. I poured. We both watched the steam for a second, as if it could write an answer in the air. "Dr. Ben Yosef," I said, handing her a cup. "Start me with your first-hand facts. I'll read the seal while you speak." She adjusted her glasses, focused. "An anonymous donor left that reed case at the Museum of Levantine Antiquities this afternoon. No return address, just a note. When the east wind lowers the reeds, seek what was misfiled. The courier is on our retainer for securance." I collected it the minute my assistant called me. I ran the receipt, locked the museum, and followed.
"Why me?"
I asked, rolling the reed case and listening to the wax creak at the joints. The buried air inside moved like a sleeper turning. Layla's smile was small and quick, because someone once watched you sniff a jar lid and tell a room full of skeptics what decade the pitch was cooked. Also because she tapped the wax impression. "This seal mark is a rare one. 2 papyrus stems bound together. And I kept a small blue bead for luck once. It looks exactly like that." "My condolences to your patients," I said. "Luck grows heavy. What's the story stitched to this thread?" She straightened. "There's a rumor, a persistent one. During the time of Ramesses II, Egyptian officials secretly negotiated with the group the Bible calls the Israelites, runaway laborers. The rumor says a vizier offered amnesty and service on the frontier in exchange for their return. The group's leader refused. The copy that proves it was made by an Egyptian scribe, filed among grain accounts and hidden again after a vault collapse. People call it the Papyrus of the 2 Covenants, 2 offers, 2 seals, 2 decisions. "High stakes," I said softly. In the firelight, the wax gleamed like a calm pool. "And the danger? If it exists and if we can locate it," she said, "we have one chance. The donor's note implies the marsh drains under an east wind. The Wadi Tumilat runs east-west. The old store city of Per-Atum Pithom is there. So is Pi-Ramesses, the Ramesside capital to the north. If the cache lies in a sub-basement accessed by a sluice, the window to reach it is only while the wind holds. After dawn, the floodgate will refill. The archive would be lost. If scavengers or a rival team arrive first, they burn the rumor and me with it." I set the case down and pressed my fingertips lightly into the wax seal, feeling each ridge of the double tie. "You've been here before," I said. Her jaw tightened a degree. "A colleague forged a cartouche once. I trusted it. I don't get a second scandal. If this is a trap, I need it to be a trap you survive." I nodded. The courier stirred and let out a low, relieved sound. I covered him with a blanket and rested my palm above the pulse point in his wrist. Steady, present. "You brought the storm inside," I said, and meant it kindly. "Let's open our umbrellas." I reached for a thin blade, warmed it over the lamp, and slid it under the wax's edge. The seal moaned, then gave. The scent rose, a wet reed bed after rain. I eased the wax away in one piece, preserving the impression. Inside, no scroll, only a palm-sized shard of clay label, a tally tag from some long, quiet shelf. Across it, a smeared line of hieratic, quick cursive script Egyptian scribes used for daily life read, in simple strokes, BT11, followed by a barley tally mark. "Back, tier 17, Layla breathed," or barley tier. BT can be both in English, but the tally mark, barley, it might mean the barley section of the back tier. Number 17. I held the shard to the lamplight. The clay had been fired hard. Whoever hid it meant to leave a clue that water could not take. At the edge of the wax, a filament of that locust wing had been caught and preserved, like a pressed leaf. I brought it close. The vein structure matched what I remembered from field notes on spring outbreaks. A locust, spring, plague season, or simply the time of year when locusts are everywhere. Either way, a springtime stamp. I brought the wax impression to my nose again and breathed. Nile mud, acacia gum, a hint of old grain dust in the hollow of the case, and that blue bead, the tiny scarab, sky caught in glass. I rolled it under my thumb. It chimed against the wooden rim in the slightest way. Layla watched me with the steadiness of someone at the edge of a cliff who trusts a rope. "Per-Atum," she said softly. "Pithom, store cities. That's where the Israelites labored according to Exodus. And Pi-Ramesses," I added. "Ramesses II's capital in the eastern delta. Chariot yards, stables, colonnades where officials walked in linen and talked about order. The Wadi Tumilat, a channel running east-west, fed the sea of reeds marshes. Under a strong east wind, those marshes could empty, exposing mudflats and channels. The Hebrew text says, 'An east wind blew all night, and the sea parted.' That wind is the key in more than one sense. I set the shard on the cloth. Our case begins with a rumor. A vizier made an offer. The leader of the fugitives refused, saying his allegiance belonged to the one who walks in the cloud. If true, it would show that Pharaoh negotiated and failed. That's a story some would burn. Our job is to make sure it's not burned and to read it before water turns the ink to ghosts." The rain softened until it was no more than a distant hiss. The room held its breath. I looked at Layla. "We will follow the east wind," I said. "Tonight." Chapter 2. The Museum's Whisper. Everything we needed fit inside the quiet. Layla laid out the small facts like stones on a path. The reed case, water-stained, the grain of the wood raised and rough where fingers had polished it before. The seal, blue wax with the two tied papyrus stems impressed cleanly and then smudged in one place where a nervous thumb had tested it. The faience scarab bead, caught in the wax like a fish in amber, intentional, a breadcrumb. The locust wing fragment under the case's binding thread, a spring marker, a hint at timing, and maybe a nod to the plagues that stalk every Exodus discussion. Inside, only that shard of fired clay, stamped with a smeared hieratic docket reading BT-1 Nen and marked with a barley tally. The wax scent. Nile mud and acacia gum, precisely what Egyptian scribes would have on their fingers. The faint dust in the case. Old grain, the dry breath of a storehouse. No scroll, not yet. Layla rested her index finger on the clay shard. The anonymous note was clear but coy, she said. When the east wind lowers the reeds, seek what was misfiled. That's language from two worlds. One, the narrative world of Exodus. Two, the workable world of warehouse shelving. I nodded. Misfiled can mean deliberately misplaced so it would survive an audit. I turned the shard over. No other marks. BT-17 suggests a shelf coordinate. Per-Atum was a store city, vaults, sublevels. Pi-Ramesses nearby. Ramesside administrative systems were exacting. If a scribe wanted to keep something, he would hide it inside the everyday underbarley rolls, behind a fallen wall, in a tier that floods by design so only one night in 1,000 is safe for entry. Layla removed her scarf and wrung the water into a bowl I slid across the table. The papyrus I'm hoping to find, she said, is rumored to be in 2 parts. The 2 covenants. One official offer from an Egyptian vizier, amnesty and frontier service in exchange for return. One formal refusal dictated by the rebel leader, copied into Egyptian by a civil scribe. She took a breath. If it's true, it means the archive holds a copy of that refusal. Hori, if we were in that time, would do anything to destroy it. Hori? I asked. Royal archivist and keeper of the king's seal, she replied. The kind of official who believes that ambiguity unravels order. I could almost hear the soft tap of a reed stylus against a palm. All right, I said. Tell me the rest of what your anonymous left out. Layla smiled without humor. Nothing more, just the drop at the museum and the line about the east wind. She touched the blue bead in the wax. But this is the exact bead I once kept for luck. The anonymous knows me, knows I'll see it, knows I'll come to you. The anonymous wants the docket found, not to frame you, I said. A forger would stuff this case with a convincing but wrong papyrus. Instead, we have a fired label shard, honest emptiness, a breadcrumb. I stood and stretched, letting the spine unknot, and crossed to the shelf where maps live. I pulled a thin drawer, slid out a traced survey of the Wadi Tumilat, channels like blue threads, Per-Atum marked with a square of old storehouses, Pi-Ramesses like a crowned stamp to the north. I laid the map flat where the lamplight could graze it gently. For the record, I said, tapping locations. Pi-Ramesses was Ramesses II's capital in the eastern delta, along branches of the Nile, stables and chariot yards, bulls that pulled ploughs in the morning and hauled gold-laden carts by afternoon. Per-Atum, Pithom lay along the Wadi Tumilat, the trench of water that cut toward the east. Those are the store cities that Exodus mentions. The sea of reeds marshes were shallow bodies of water, reeds tall as a man. Under a sustained east wind, those waters could lower, exposing a dry path where there was only water by day. That's in the physics and in the text. Wind blew all night. A scribe who knew his landscape could make a cache that opens only under that wind. Layla traced the map with the back of a fingernail. It's beautiful, she said, and then, quietly and brutal, I understood her meaning. These maps show how people move grain and armies, and how they sometimes move people as if they were grain. We will move quietly, I said. What we are saving is voice, not victory songs. The courier stirred again. I knelt and lifted a cup of tea to his lips. He swallowed once, twice, and blinked. Blue? Wax? He asked, uncertain whether anything had been delivered. In one piece, I said. You can rest. He nodded, eyes closing as if the words were a blanket. He would wait to know he had done his job. That is a small mercy in a world where many do not get to know that. Layla adjusted her cardigan, steadied, and then asked the question that matters most when a dream case arrives. Can you do this tonight? Yes, I said. We have to. The clock we're obeying is not the one on the mantle, it's the wind. I tapped the map. When the east wind lowers the reeds, that is our door. We go when the door is open. She nodded. A line of rain ran down the pane and broke into beads. The fire gave a soft pop in the grate. I pulled the reed case closer and slid my fingers across the wax one more time, memorizing the feel of the double tie. 2 stems bound together. 2 covenants bound and opposed. The rumor had a spine. Dr. Ben Yosef, I said. If we find this, it will unsettle tidy stories, but it will not harm truth. Truth breathes with tensions like this. Pharaohs negotiate. Fugitives refuse. Clerks save what power once burned. That is human. Layla exhaled a laugh, small but real. I needed to hear that. Then let me say one more thing, I added, voice low and even. Panic is a poor tool for a detective. We will keep our eyes on the double knot and the east wind. We will ignore the noise. I gathered what I always gather. My kettle hummed, and I warmed my hands over its thin steam. I set out a clean cloth, a small knife, a blue glass shade for a lamp. Blue is kind to the eyes in the dark, and a pouch of resin dust for reviving faded ink. I checked the pocket where I keep a reed, breathing tube for waterwork. And yes, I took from my desk a slim card on which a single line was written in an old alphabet. A lullaby, the first one I ever filed for this purpose, for pacing breath, for keeping the mind steady. The rain was only a memory against the window now, a texture more than a sound. Layla stood, collected herself, and squared her shoulders. What do you need from me? She asked. Just this, I said. Be at peace for an hour. If the wind favors us, I'll be back before the kettle cools. I smiled, a small one. If the wind does not favor us, I will still be back. We adjust. She nodded. You take care of fragile truths, she said. I'll take care of the man on your rug. Agreed, I said. I drew the curtains halfway, dimmed the lamp until the room was a hush of amber and shadow, and put both hands around the warm belly of the kettle. The heat soaked into my palms and climbed to my forearms like a slow tide. I held that warmth and let my breath match the tiny clicks of the cooling metal. We will follow the east wind, I said, voice easy, nearly a lullaby now. We will go to Pi-Ramesses and Per-Atum. We will find Bactier 17. We will read what was misfiled. Chapter 2. The Door of Sleep. Sleep is a door when you ask it kindly. I tipped my head against the chair back and let the rooms align, the study with its tea and fire, and the long corridor that runs from here to then. The kettle released a thread of steam that thinned into dream fog. The leather under me softened and became something with a sway to it. The ticking clock became the hollow plunk of water touching reeds. I breathed in, slow, resin and rain. I breathed out, slower, amber, paper, wool. On the next breath, the smell changed. River, night, mud, cool air. Someone had lifted the ceiling and traded it for stars. The chair returned as a cedar skiff. I was barefoot, standing in ankle-deep water inside the little boat. The wood was cool and smooth under my soles, and a thin film of silt ran where the plank met the gunwale. The night lay across the marsh like a deep blue cloth. Reeds rose around me, tall and whispering, their thin leaves bending with the invisible hand that moved them. The east wind was blowing. I could hear it in the low hiss of the reeds leaning, in the soft hiss of water drawing back. Ahead, and slightly to the left, a long, low line of buildings reached into the dark. Lanterns bobbed along mud brick walls. Though the night was cool, there was the warmth of stored heat in the bricks, radiating like a breath. To the north, silhouetted against a scattering of stars, I could see the suggestion of colonnades and broad courts. That would be Pi-Ramesses, the Ramesside capital, orderly, proud. To the southeast, on the line of the Wadi Tumulot, the even lower shapes of storehouses, Per-Atum, Pithom, the place of Atum, the setting sun. In the hollow between them, a skein of water shifted and sank under the wind. The skiff rocked gently. My hands knew the pole without a thought. I placed it into the soft mud and pushed. The boat slid soundlessly forward. A heron lifted slow wings and passed like a moving piece of night. Far off, dogs barked and fell quiet. The smell of damp grain and bitumen-sealed bricks reached me, a dry sweet line like old bread. "The east wind lowers the reeds," I murmured. The reeds lowered, the channels narrowed and exposed small shelves of sticky earth where fish wrote small hieroglyphs with their tails. I kept my ears open for another sound, the sound of men who make it their job to erase what others write. I did not have to wait long. A straight line of torchlight swept a wall, then disappeared and reappeared as it moved along the perimeter. Voices, low in practiced patterns. The clear, authoritative tone of someone who expects obedience. Hori would be alive and well in any era. The keeper of the king's seal lives in the confidence of systems. It is a music everyone recognizes. I kept to the center of the channel and became another reed shadow. The skiff slid past a tangle of roots, and I leaned, letting my hand brush the water. It was low, the wind was doing its work. If there is a sluice into a back tier, tonight is when it opens. Nearer now. The mud brick walls of Per-Atum's storerooms rose from the water like the edges of a book left open to dry. Ladders leaned, pottery jars stood in rows, their mouths capped with clay. In the distance, I heard the steady snort and stamp of chariot horses in stables. Pi-Ramesses slept with one eye open. I found a tie-off stake near a low quay and looped the skiff's rope in a quick figure 8. The knot held as if it had always waited for me. Above, a guard's cough. The torchlight drifted away. I stood for a moment, letting the scene settle into me with the softness one reserves for lullabies. This was not a museum map now. This was stone and straw and water pulling back like someone drawing a blanket smooth. The air was cool on my face, and the east wind moved across my skin like a hand anyone would welcome. I took an inventory with the care a diver takes with oxygen. Blue-shaded lamp corked, to be lit later when eyes have adjusted. Pouch of resin dust. Reed breathing tube. Small knife. Empty cloth for wrapping a box. I put my palm on the skiff's rim to feel the wood's temperature. Cool, calm. I lifted my eyes. Across a narrow runnel, a wall bore a faint stamp on one of its bricks where plaster had fallen away. I couldn't read it at this distance, but the logic that brought me here told me what it should be. Men-Petter, maker's mark of a brickmaker's batch used in a lower tier, a secondary storage basement favoured for overflow, the kind that floods seasonally. BT17, back tier 17. Behind a wall like that, in a slot of space that only dries under the push of an east wind, someone could tuck a cedar box and tie a secret tight with a double knot. I knelt in the skiff and let my fingers hover over the water. The wind had a steady hand tonight. Dawn was hours away. This was our window. As ever, the danger was real. A royal archivist who relishes control is a predator that hunts by rules, and rules can be predictable. But panic is still a poor tool for a detective. I took one breath, two, and felt the rhythm find me. I placed the reed tube at my belt. I thought of Layla's steady eyes and the courier's open hand. I thought of the blue bead in the wax and the locust wing caught like a pressed story. I thought of the double-tied stems, the way they lifted from the seal like reeds themselves. Back tier 17, I whispered to the night. Per-Atum, Pi-Ramesses, the sea of reeds. Then I eased the skiff along the wall toward the dark mouth of a sluice. The opening was a square shadow dosed above the waterline, framed by bricks that carried a faint, older dampness. The water moved there with a purpose out. The east wind pulled it like thread through a needle's eye. I put my palm to the bricks and felt the cool. The stamp near my hand was worn but legible. Men-Per, a name that meant we were in the right place, at the right depth, in the right kind of storage. I smiled, small and sure. Doors answer when you call them by their names. Behind me, the reeds rustled softly, not as warning, but as a lull in a song before the next verse. I breathed once more in the quiet center of what could be a storm, and then, without a ripple louder than a sigh, I slid toward the dark, ready to enter the storeroom's throat. The east wind held. The night was ours to use. Chapter 4. Lanterns, Men-Petter, and a whisper to destroy reeds pressed their cool blades against the skiff. The east wind stroked the marsh so gently that the water seemed to breathe. I poled once, twice, and let the current guide me toward the low silhouettes of Per-Atum's storehouses, vaulted rooms of mud brick, sealed with bitumen, made to keep grain dry in flood and harvest both. I could smell damp barley and wet straw, and something tar-sharp from the bitumen seams. Lanterns bobbed along the mud brick walls, clipping the darkness into little sections of yellow. This was Per-Atum, Pithom, the store city along the Wadi Tumilat in the age of Ramesses II. The capital, Pi-Ramesses, lay to the north like a sleeping colossus, but here the storehouses kept the lifeblood of an empire: grain, oil, and records. Records were grain for the mind, and men like Hori tended them with the precision of a millstone. I slid from the skiff into knee-deep water and felt the pull of the sluices that spidered under the storerooms. The wind had done its work through the night. It had lowered the marsh, draining gutters and sumps, exposing places that by day would be underwater. The east wind was my ally and my clock. When it tired, the water would creep back, and whatever lay hidden below would drown in silt until another lucky night. Dogs barked once, twice, then fell silent. A heron rose, pale and smooth. I stepped onto a plank and up onto a narrow lane. My bare soles memorized the grit. From behind a wall, footsteps approached with the crisp rhythm of men who belonged here. Voices, then the low command tone of a man who expected his instructions to matter. "Hori," I whispered to myself, and then I saw him. He came with a small procession, 2 Medjay guards in leather and linen, with curved batons, a lamp bearer, a scribe with a wooden pallet, and Hori himself, the royal archivist. Medjay were elite Egyptian police, desert trackers, now palace eyes and hands. Hori did not look like a warrior. He looked like a rule-given skin, shaved head brushed with perfumed oil, kohl drawing his eyes into attentive slits, a pleated kilt that caught the lantern light, a broad collar of faience beads that shone like tiny Nile ponds. A ring on his finger bore the royal cartouche. When he lifted his hand, the lantern showed a face of careful lines and a mouth that did not quite know how to smile. He tapped a reed stylus against his palm, once, twice. "Sweep Vault B," he said softly. Musical, precise. Foreign labor ledgers, unusual seals, duplicate dockets. Destroy what undermines the living God's dignity. There it was, the threat. Not a sword, a bonfire of papers. The living God was Pharaoh. Dignity was a story, and Hori would prune it into shape. I kept a shadow at another shape against brick. My breath stayed low. Panic is a poor tool for a detective. I took a breath and let my eyes map the place. The lane ran between 2 long storerooms. The bricks were thick, sturdy, set by long habit. Near a collapsed section of Vault B, the ground sloped toward a dark mouth where water had once trickled. A sluice. On the slope, half buried in silt and straw, something small and deliberately made winked at me in the lamplight. The wind teased away a skein of cattail fluff. I knelt, keeping one elbow tight into my side, and pinched the object free. It was a fired clay tag, the size of a thumb, pierced for a cord. The impression was clear despite grit. 2 bound papyrus stems under a neat double tie, exactly the sign from the blue wax that had found my desk. Around it, in quick strokes, sat a short hieratic note. Per-Atum, BT 17. Hieratic is the cursive shorthand of Egyptian scribes. BT looked like a storage code. Back, tier. The clay felt heavy, dense. A tag meant the thing it tagged mattered. I ran my fingertip over the collapsed brick edge near the sluice and felt a different texture in the underlayer. Smooth, then rough under the smoothing Per-Atum. The smooth, respected, then babeless, is a muff I will live a contract leper, says he. Smooth, then rough under the smoothing Per-Atum, a maker's stamp in reverse. I pressed the pad of my finger into the stamp and lifted it clear to the lantern's reach. A name, Men-Peti. I said it in my mouth, like a small, steady drum. Men-Peti. Bricks from his yard had built a lower, secondary storage tier, a place newer capstones hid. Lower tiers flood first, they also dry last. If you wanted to hide a box you could get at only when the east wind pulled the plug, you would set it behind men-petty bricks, down in the dark, where a normal day would drown your tracks. Archivist, a medjay muttered, pointing at a shelf visible through a cracked door across the lane. Hori glanced in. He did not walk, he glided, one of those men whose spine seems convinced that bending is a vice. He lifted a box from an upper shelf, weighed it, and opened it. His finger traced a docket. He hissed, softly, a snake careful not to wake a sleeping child. "Empty boxes and clever tags," he said. "Someone hides duplications." He turned a little, and the lantern light threw his profile against the wall. I saw the thinness of his lips when he thought. His stylus tapped again, patient and relentless. Behind him the scribe murmured, "Yes, keeper of the seal." I let my hand close around the clay tag. The two bound stems, the neat double tie, the simple certainty of the letters BT11. The path opened like a reed bed before a skiff. The first clue had guided my hands. The threat had shown his face. Between them lay water, brick, and time. The east wind brushed the reeds. The marsh replied. I stood, as plain as a shadow can be, and stepped back into the dark. Chapter 5, in which a scribe counts to 7. A slip of linen moved where the wall met the alley. It was a figure, slight, with ink still shining on one thumb. She kept her head low, the way a person walks through a room where glass lies on the floor and the lights are out. When she came close, I saw her eyes first, quick, steady when I met them, then down again to watch her steps. "Merit?" I said, very softly. Names calm the ears. They tell the heart that a person has shape and history. Merit nodded. The reed behind her ear shook, a small nervous flag. "I moved them," she whispered. "Months ago, after the earth-cracked Vault B, I did not want the clerk blamed." "Tell me as if we had an hour," I said. "We have 5 minutes. The wind is in our favor." She pulled the linen scarf tighter and drew me into a pocket of shadow by a stack of jars. Her voice was soft and quick, like someone counting to skipping every other number to save time. The quake opened a seam behind BT17, back tier, a lower bay, flooded usually. We had boxes with the blue wax, the double-tied stems. A junior logged them, poor boy. Hori saw the docket, his face. He smiled without smiling. I moved the boxes under barley accounts. I hid the docket behind ration rolls for the papyri. She paused. "That's what they call the foreign workers. Some are Israelites. I saw their lists. The bread, their children's names." "Hori suspects," I said. "He does. He thinks the papyri ration rolls hide treachery. He has the medjay searching the upper shelves now." She inhaled, and I heard the tension catch. BT17 is below, through the sluice. When the east wind blows, the sluice drains. Only tonight. She reached into the fold at her waist and pressed something into my palm. Metal touched my skin, with the cool of a quiet stream. A bronze key tag, stamped clean and deep. BT17. I weighed it. Simple, sturdy. Not a key itself, a key's memory, a label for the right lock or the right shelf, a way to match brass to wood and not to lose track in the dark. With it came a palm-length stick, grooved, 7 notches cut clean along its face. "What's this?" I asked, though I knew in part. "A counting stick," she said. He called it the 2 covenants, 2 copies, 2 seals. He said, "The notches are for the nights they argued." 7. Around the feast of unleavened bread, when people leave their dough to bake in haste, with no time to rise. She swallowed. The clerk said a vizier sent a letter, amnesty and work at the border forts, frontier service, forgiveness if they returned, and the reply. The fugitives' leader refused. He said his steps are bound to the one who walks in the cloud, and he will not serve 2 masters. An Egyptian scribe wrote his words. He drew a little cloud by the line to mark the god. She looked up at me. "Hori wants the refusal burned. If Pharaoh never negotiated, then he never lost an argument. That is how Hori thinks." I nodded and let the shape of it settle. I kept my breath steady, and I looked at her ink-smeared fingers. "You are brave," I said. "You hid them where a kind mind would think to look only if it cared about people as much as papers." "I am foolish," she said, "but I could not let the junior scribe be punished. He was used copying. He copies well." He drew the double tie neatly. He kept a rubbing of Hori's seal to practice countermarks. I hid that too, inside a barley roll docket. Her mouth tightened, then softened. "I'm telling you because you look like someone who listens." "I do," I said. "Tell me one more thing. If the ink is faded," she almost smiled, "like a candle flame that remembers it is allowed to be warm. Resin smoke. Hold the papyrus near it. Dust with a pinch of powdered resin. Wine steam helps too. Not too much heat. The ink darkens. The smoke wakes the carbon." I took the bronze tag and the counting stick and slid them into the inner fold of my shirt, where the cloth was dry. "We will need a light that will not blind us," I said, "and distractions, something harmless, something certain." "I can lead a goat," she said. "There are jars stacked along the outer lane. I can make a clatter and blush like a novice. The medjay will not suspect their own clatter." She looked toward the lane. "Hori is checking dockets, but he won't look low while the wind holds. He trusts shelves. He doesn't trust water." "Then water is our doorway," I said, "and BT Misten is our room." She nodded and stepped back. The reed behind her ear bumped her head wrap and fell into her hand. She seemed relieved to be useful. Fear did not leave her. It moved into a corner where it could watch and not disturb. "The east wind is kind," she said, "but it grows tired by dawn. Then we will treat it as a friend who has to leave early," I said. "We will not keep it past its hour." She took a breath and let it out slowly, counting with the tip of her thumb against the pad of her fingers. I counted my own breaths to match. 7. An old human habit, to steady the hands before you reach into dark water. Chapter Seed, in which we hold our breath beneath a barge, footfalls scraped. Voices came closer. Merritt's eyes widened, and she flicked her sight toward a shadow where a woven reed barge lay half-shored against the wall. We slid. The world cooled by 2 degrees when we pressed ourselves down into the gap reed hull, a low roof, the ground still damp. The woven bottoms of sandals, the hems of linen kilts, passed inches away. A torch's heat licked the underside of the barge and made the reeds smell sweet for a heartbeat. "Empty boxes and clever tags," Hori said again, speaking to the air as if it were a student who needed a lesson twice. Someone thinks I do not know archives. Paper whisked. A box thumped. We do not lose control of stories, he breathed. We curate them. The word landed like a weight. The Medjay's sandals stopped. A baton tapped the plank above my head. I kept my breathing shallow and slow. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like a man climbing a long set of steps with a sleeping child on his shoulder. Panic is noisy. Patience is quiet. Merit pressed her palm against the ground between us. It lifted inch by inch, and I could feel the tremble steady as she slowed her breath to match mine. The east wind threaded the alley and pulled at the hairs on my forearm. The sluice somewhere to our left whispered as it drained. Hori's voice softened, a hiss of satisfaction. Look, he said to the scribe. Labels from the chariot remount logs on these boxes. A vizier's seal mixed into grain accounts, duplications. Someone tried to hide something here, and then tried not to leave their fingerprints when they moved it. The baton tapped again. Search the drain, he said. Search the drain. The lantern light swung, then pulled away, splashing footsteps. The Medjay waded into a shallow runnel and poked their baton into the water as if expecting a fish that read ledgers to dart away. The sluice's mouth gaped like a sleeping cat. Merit's lips were at my ear, her whisper without breath. There were 2 documents. The words warmed my skin. One was a vizier's offer, signed with a seal that the chariot yards also used. Frontier duty. Amnesty. The other was the reply, dictated by their leader. An Egyptian hand copied it onto our papyrus. The copy included a mark, 2 ties, side by side, to show that both parties had spoken. And he drew a pillar of cloud, a simple line curved like a child's smoke. He said, Our steps are bound to the one who walks in the cloud. We will not serve 2 masters. She swallowed. Hori wants that one burned most of all. He told the scribe next to me that if anyone ever asked, there was only silence. That Pharaoh did not parley with people who ran. I saw it in my mind, the neat curls of hieratic ink, the seal's blue wax pressed by a practiced hand, the small, drawn cloud. It made something in my chest settle, like a lid finding its pot. Boot heels ground grit. The Medjay at the drain muttered, Nothing but weeds and silt. Then search again, Hori said. I am very patient. That was true. He was patient like levees. He would hold back until pressure made the water look for a lower place to go. We lay still for 3 deep breaths. The lantern glow withdrew. The reed hull cooled again. I counted to 7 with my thumb against the notches of Merit's stick in my mind, though the stick itself lay at my chest. 7 nights of argument. 7 lines a scribe might have drawn with the same hand he used for barley numbers and rations for workers on wall-building teams. When the alley returned to the soft, dark tones of wind and distant hoof-muffled shifts in the chariot yard, I touched the barge bottom and eased us out. Merit looked smaller now against the wall, but her shoulders were set. She had chosen a line inside herself and stepped onto it. People are maps too, if you know how to read their roads. We move now, I said, before Hori's patience shows him a new way to look. We slid along the lane. The sluice mouth opened like a throat. The water inside was shallow and dull. The brickwork on its sides showed the edge of the collapse, a seam where fresher bricks had sagged. In the mortar lines, little fingerprints froze time. Prints of men who pressed these bricks into place, the day Menpeti's yard sent them. The east wind brushed again, and the water lowered like a blanket be pulled down to a sleeper's chin. The timing would be tight. Tight is fine. It focuses the mind. Chapter tone. Reeds laid in parallel. The boathouse smelled of fish and rope and old wood that had known tides. It was a small, quiet square, cut from the dark and held in place by 4 posts and a roof. One narrow skiff floated in the bay, tied with a knot that could release with one pull. I liked that knot. He understood urgency without fuss. Merritt waited at the doorway while I stepped inside and made a small table of my knees. I laid out our clues like I would lay reeds side by side to weave a mat. Each had weight. Each had direction. The double-knotted papyrus stems seal equals the phrase 2 covenants, 2 parties, 2 copies. The bronze tag stamped BT-1 lever points to back tier 17, down below the usual aisle where lower storage stands. The fired clay tag repeats it with the same symbol. The Menpeti brick stamp under my fingertip tells me the lower layer was built with his yard's blocks, which sets our target behind a secondary skin, likely what cracked in the quake. The locust wing fragment from the courier's binding thread says spring and crisis. Locusts come with plagues, and plagues live in the same season as the feast of unleavened bread. The blue wax formula on the desk back home matches delta seals used for administration here at Per-Atum and Pi-Ramesses. It would have the smell of Nile mud and acacia gum even now. The counting stick with 7 notches fits the story. 7 nights of argument. The rumor of a vizier's offer and a refusal linked to the one who walks in the cloud maps exactly onto the Exodus tradition. Negotiations before departure, a people who will not go back to servitude after tasting freedom. Because Vault B cracked and the sluice drains only under a strong east wind, any hideaway that needs air and fingertip access would sit behind a loosened patch of Menpeti brickwork in back tier 17. The archivist's sweep of upper shelves tells me he hasn't yet imagined that water is a corridor. He is a shelf man. He trusts what can be counted with dry hands. He doesn't suspect the underwater entry. Therefore, our way is through the drain, tonight, while the wind holds. I spoke this out loud, in a voice even and slow, because thinking aloud turns a maze into a line. We seek a cedar box behind Menpeti bricks, in BT-15 of Per-Atum's Vault B, I said, each phrase an oarstroke. We can reach it through the sluice when the east wind is strongest. Hori believes in shelves, we believe in water. Merritt's mouth twitched with a tiny, incredulous smile. Relief, yes, but also the strange joy of seeing scattered puzzle pieces become a picture. Humans love order, when the order is kind. What if Hori sends men to the drain again, she asked. Then we teach him what he expects to learn, I said. We give him something to find that will satisfy his need to win while leaving the truth intact. I pulled a small pouch from my belt. We brought resin dust. We have a blue shaded lamp. Blue light protects night sight. We have a reed tube to breathe through, should the gap be tight and shallow. We have bread paste and lampblack to make a convincing seal if a decoy needs a face. And we have time enough to do all of this if we do not waste any doing something else. I checked the bronze tag again, running my thumb over BT1 scene as if it were a prayer. Tell me about the box, I said. The one you moved. Describe the wood. Cedar, she said. Not too large. oiled to keep the damp out, linen wrapped. The blue wax had the two tied papyrus stems. The scribe who handled it used a careful hand. He liked good lines. She hesitated. When I lifted it, I felt that I did not want to hurt it, like when you carry a sleeping child and try not to wake them. Then it was made to last, I said. Good. We will not have to repair much. Only move it and read jute enough to know we have the right thing. A goat bleated outside, soft, indignant about a tether or a fly. The sound belonged here. I let it anchor my thoughts. Anchors are useful in water and in ideas. Recap for me, I said, to make sure we shared the same map. Say the whole thing plain. Merit closed her eyes and let the words fall, simple and clear. We will slip through the sluice into back tier 17 while the east wind keeps the water low. We will find a loosened patch of Menpeti brick where the quake cracked Vault B. Behind it, there should be a cedar box with the double tie seal 2 covenants. Inside are 2 documents. A vizier offer to the Israelites, and the Egyptian copy of the refusal dictated by their leader, with a little cloud drawn. If Hori's men come, I will lead a goat and knock jars to pull them away. If they search the drain, you will be under the water and leave a decoy box in a niche where they can see it. They will take the decoy and burn it, and tell everyone they destroyed treachery. The real box will be on your belt, under the water, and we will walk out as quiet as the wind. She opened her eyes. You will read just enough by resin smoke to be sure. I nodded. Good. You understand it as I do. You may be a better detective than you think. She shook her head, smiling this time. I know shelves and how to listen. Listening is half of it, I said. The other half is patience. The remaining half is luck. That is 3 halves, she whispered. It is, and somehow it still adds to 1, I said. Humor is a tool. It loosens tight thoughts without making them sloppy. Outside, a torch's light crawled across the far wall. The patter of a patrol changed rhythm. A man's step when he is bored moves differently than when he is curious. These sounded bored. The goat bleated again, louder this time, as if it were trying out a new voice. The east wind will slow near dawn, I said. Water creeps back when the sun does, like a cat returning to its warm place. We must be done before then. We will be, Merit said, and it sounded like a promise she meant to keep. Chapter 8, in which water becomes a clock. Preparation is a lullaby with steps. You hum it, your hands move to it. The body remembers what comes next. I unrolled a small oiled cloth and set out the pieces I would trust inside the drain. A lamp with a blue glass shade, the kind sailors use in fog. Blue light is kind to pupils in the dark. It keeps the world from becoming a white blank when the flame flares. I corked it so I could carry it sideways and not drown it under a splash. A pouch of powdered resin, pine and acacia, fine as flour, to dust a papyrus with when its ink has faded. A small vial of thin wine, to steam gently if the script needed coaxing. A reed tube, graphite dark, long enough to keep my face just above the small ripple of water in a tight space. 2 decoy bundles wrapped in linen, each tied with a neat double-knot seal. The faces molded from bread paste and lampblack and pressed with a handmade gem of 2 bound papyrus stems. Merit's hands had been careful. She had used the rubbing she had kept tucked in the docket's fold to carve a convincing mimic of Horry's countermark. When she'd pressed it into the paste, it took like a good impression in wet sand. Convincing enough in torchlight, I said. He will be too satisfied to study before the burn. And the true seal? Merritt asked. If I must lift it to confirm, I will melt it at enough at the edge to ease it off and then warm it again to reseat. The impression will look unbroken. Blue wax is forgiving if the hand is steady. She nodded and pointed to the lane. I will take the goat along the outer path and stumble. The jars will answer. The medjay will go towards sound like little boys to a drum. She touched her chest. I will keep the stick with notches. Count 7 breaths, then come back and be by the skiff. If cornered, I said, I will leave the decoy in a niche where Horry will see it with triumph. And you will discover it on cue. You will say, "Archivist, here! In the drain?" Your voice must be eager. Not too much, honest, eager. Like someone who wants to rise and be seen. She swallowed and nodded. I can do that. We moved as if already in the plan. Merritt took the goat's rope and the animal's little bell chimed once, an unworried note. She guided it toward the outer lane. I crouched, tucked the lamp and the reed tube into the crook of my arm, and slid into the shallow sluice, my body a measured line. The first curl of water around my ribs was cool and clean, with a faint taste of clay. Ahead, the tunnel darkened. The brick showed that nice split between old and new, a thin seam, like a wrinkle at the corner of a wise eye. I paused and turned a loose brick with my fingers, feeling for the maker's smooth stamp, menpeti. It was right where it should be. The mortar around it had hairline gaps where the quake had shaken it. I wiggled the brick and set it aside, holding it upright against the wall, ready to slip back into place behind me. Menpeti would hide me both ways. The wind blew, and the water level dipped another inch, like a nod of permission. From the lane above, a clatter burst, jars colliding, a goat complaining about the sudden mess it had caused and did not regret. Merritt's voice rose, flustered into the right way. "Oh, watch, I'm sorry." There was the thump of a baton against a jar, a medjay's automatic reaction to sound. Then another. Then the neat shuffle of men drawn to a problem because problems told them who they were. I slid my shoulder through the gap into the space behind BT-17. It was a small, cramped chamber, high enough to crouch, not high enough to stand fully. The smell of old grain and old oil swam in it. I set the brick back to where it had been and pressed it dust until it held. The world narrowed to cool air, the rasp of my breath, and the soft lapping hiss of the end of a long drain. I let my head tilt forward so the reed tube lay across my lips like a flute. I tasted water, then air, then water again. The blue lamp made a small moon in my hands. I shielded it with my palm and set it low. Shadows settled, smooth and soft. There, along the inner wall, under a lip of brick, a little niche, and in the deeper line, beneath a fold of linen and a smear of silt, a shape that had waited like a held breath. Cedar, oiled, wrapped. The wax at its seal gleamed a deep, sleeping blue. 2 bound papyrus stems, a double tie. I did not rush my hands. I let my thumb learn the pattern of the seal and the curve of the linen's edge. Then, because certainty is comfort, I warmed the wax at the lip, with the lamp held close enough to blush the surface but not drip it. The wax softened. I raised it with a thin bone pick from my kit, eased it free without tearing its face, and then pressed it back into its home. A perfect cameo reseated in its ring. The lid lifted. The resin dust puffed like a quiet thought when I pinched it and decanted it into the thin air over the first roll of papyrus. Faded ink always sits like a ghost until a little smoke invites it back to the table. I let a thread of wine steam ooze from the lip of the vial near the surface, not touching, but close enough to call. The letters darkened by degrees. I read in the tiniest voice, almost mouthing each word like a child with a bedtime story. The vizier's courteous lines came first. Titles lined like soldiers, a tone trained never to forget who holds rank, a memorandum offering amnesty to the servants of the house who have departed to the marshes, with the terms, frontier service at the forts, bread rations, protection. It was the Empire's soft hand, offered when the hard hand bruised and got nowhere. The second roll unfurled with the same careful Egyptian hand. Words spoken by the leader of the people to the one who sits in Pharaoh's shadow, it began. Then the refusal. Simple, unornamented. Our steps are bound to the one who walks in the cloud. We will not serve two masters. We will go. At the margin, a little curved line, a child's curl of smoke, the pillar of cloud in miniature, kind enough to make a scribe smile if he permitted himself such things. Above, a splash. Closer, a baton poked into the drain outside. Search the drain, Hori had said. The order had found ears. I slid the true box deeper into the shadow and took one decoy from the fold of my belt. I set it in the shallow niche, closer to the waterline, where a man wading would likely look with a torch balanced high. I pressed the bread paste seal into Dutch the right dampness, and then, with the other hand, I took the small clay countermark face that Merritt had carved after a rubbing of Hori's seal and impressed it next to the double tie it took. It looked good. It would fool him in a flicker. He would call triumph. He would take the bait. While pride hummed in his chest, the truth would be passing under his feet. I pegged the true box to my belt with a linen cord and eased my shoulders back into the water. The Menpeti brick held, and the reed tube carried air to my lips. The wind pressed its cool palm to the water once more. The clock ticked in ripples. If they found the decoy now, and they would carry it up. Merritt would be there, letting her relief and fear mix in exactly the right measure to be credible. Hori would lift the thing, see the double ties and his own countermark, and he would be kind to himself with certainty. He would retire to burn it in some neat ritual of victory, and we would put our feet where the water had been and walk out, quiet as sleep. I waited in water and shadow, listening for the cue. Above me, faint, came the sound I had asked for, the one that would turn the page of our night. A quick intake of breath from a woman who had chosen to be brave, and then a cry, clear and crisp as a bell struck once on a cool morning. "Archivist! Here, in the drain!" I smiled, though no one could see. Chapter 9, in which the east wind opens the sluice. The east wind was a cool hand on my cheek. It breathed across the reeds and drew the water thin, as if the whole marsh took a slow, steady sip. I lay on my side at the mouth of the sluice, the mud cool through linen, the brick edge pressing a quiet line into my ribs. Above me, lanterns moved like patient stars, and Hurry's careful voice drifted over stone and water. "Search the drain," he said, soft and exact. "Truth hides where water goes." He was right about that, but panic is a poor tool for a detective. I took a breath and slid forward, reed tube between my teeth, the tip above the trickle. The world became the inside of stone and damp sound. The blue shade over my corked lamp softened the light to a sleep-friendly dusk. My fingers read the wall the way others read ink. The brick faces were rough, the mortar thin. There, a shallow oval where the clay caught a seal while still damp. I stroked it once. Per-Atum. The same maker's mark I had felt before. The same mark stamped into the lower tier, the older, seasonally flooded back shelf. BT 17, back tier 17 of Per-Atum's Vault B. Water whispered over silt. Above, boots shuffled, stopped, then shuffled again. A Medjay guard coughed and cleared his throat. I held still and listened. The east wind hummed, steady as a breath in sleep. I pressed 2 fingertips into the thin mortar seam and leaned a palm flat for leverage. The Per-Atum brick eased forward a fraction, then a hair more. I caught it, cradled its weight close, and lowered it into the trickle. A cavity yawned beyond the gap, barely wider than my shoulders. The air inside was cool and stale, with the sweet, faint bite of dried acacia gum. I knew that smell. Blue wax used in the delta carried that scent. I slid my arm in, slow and sure, and my hand met wood. Oiled cedar, fine-grained, wrapped in linen that had stiffened with time and salt. I curved my fingers under the box and lifted. The weight was serious but not heavy. The east wind held the water low enough that I could ease the box into the tunnel without drowning it. "Reeds down," Hurry's voice murmured, closer now. "The drain. Bring a light." I steadied the lamp on a lip of stone and shielded it with my body. Blue light brushed linen and wood. The seal was there, a deep impression of 2 tied papyrus stems in blue wax, the double knot mark. The very sign I had seen on my desk in the waking world, stamped into a flake of dried wax. Its edges were cracked, but the impression was intact. I warmed the wax from an angle, subtle enough to soften the top skin without collapsing the design. It is a trick as old as scribes and as quiet as breath. Never hurry heat. The wax surrendered, glossy at the edges. I eased a thin copper blade under the seam and lifted, then pressed the wax back, reseating it as neatly as a blanket over sleeping shoulders. The impression held. Inside, bundled papyrus rested like layered reeds, the fibers faintly ridged under my fingertips. I moved with care. Resin dust waited in a small pouch at my wrist. I tapped a little onto a bit of glowing coal inside the lamp cage. A sweet smoke rose, soft as incense, and drifted over the ink. The faint brown lines darkened a touch, the way morning letters grow sharper when light pulls them into focus. I read aloud, in a whisper, knowing Merit would be listening by the sluice mouth, knowing that words remembered are words saved. "The vizier says," I breathed, "in the 30-something year of Usamatra Setepenre, Ramesses II, we offer amnesty, border service or the frontier, rations for families, if the fugitives will return to the order of the 2 lands." The phrasing was smooth, administrative, practiced. It referenced chariot remount logs and frontier watch lists. I saw the desk where it was written, a clean plank, a low stool, a scribe with neat nails and wary eyes. Another sheet lay beneath, Egyptian ink on Egyptian papyrus, but the voice was different, dictated, not drafted. The hand was elegant, but it leaned into words it did not own. "We will not return," it said. "Our steps are bound to the one who walks in the cloud. We will not serve two masters." There was a small sketch in the margin, simple lines forming a pillar of cloud above a stylized camp. A witness mark followed, the unusual double tie countersign that Merritt had described. Someone wanted the archive to hold not only the offer but the refusal, Egyptian eyes copying Israelite resolve. Boots sloshed at the drain. A torch hissed nearby. A halo of light reached into the tunnel. I closed the cedar case, reseated the wax, and pressed the lid with the heel of my hand until the seal cooled and settled again. I had prepared for this. From the pouch at my belt, I took the decoy, a wrapped reed case tied with bread paste cords and stamped with a perfect copy of Hori's seal. Rubbing Merritt had once stolen with courage and kept in a barley docket. I slid the true box back into shadow and nestled the decoy into a shallow niche, a place a searching hand would find first. Then, push the men-petted brick back into its old bed, but leave it a breath open, a suggestion. I wiped the edges with wet silt to make the removal look recent. Here, Merritt's voice called from above, light and a little anxious in just the right way.
Sir, there's something in the drain, I think. The brick is loose.
Hori's sandals stopped.
Take care.
Hands reached in and lifted exactly what I meant them to lift. Bread paste cords, double-tied. A blue wax impression so carefully false it would fool a coal-lined inspector at midnight. For a moment there was no sound but the east wind and my slow breath through the reed. Then Hori's voice. At last. A thread of triumph warmed his tone. At last. They withdrew. I counted slowly in my head, while the drain darkened to its own sigh. 5, 10, 15. When I reached 20, I moved. The true cedar box rested against my belly, bound to my belt with a loop of twine. I eased backward, brick to cheek, lamp low. The tunnel smelled like rivering earth and old gum. The reed between my lips tasted of green. I slid out into the sluice valve, a shadow among shadows. Merritt was crouched near the stone lip, her profile a fine line cut against the last of the night. "He's taking it to the fire," she whispered. "He will boast. He will be sure." "Good," I said softly. "Let him sleep on victory." We moved like water. She sidled along the wall with a goat's rope in her hand, her decoy duty not yet complete, those jars still wanting one more gentle top to draw the medjay to an outer lane. I crossed to the narrow channel where the cedar skiff waited. The east wind slackened a degree, like a held breath easing out. The trickle sounded more like a thread. I laid the lamp on the skiff's floorboards, still shielded in blue. I settled the box by my feet and tied it again, quick and neat. Merritt took the skiff's nose in her palm and eased it into the current. No blades drawn, no shouts, only the soft rush of returning water, the long reed sigh of a marsh exhaling. Hori's torchlight, now far inside, bobbed out of sight toward a controlled hearth where he would consign the decoy to flame with righteous calm. "Was it there?" Merritt asked, voice barely sound. "It was," I said. "Two voices in one cedar bed, an offer and a refusal. the record of a night when power asked and a people said no. Her shoulders lowered. Then, it lives. It lives, I said, quietly. We slid between reed stands that bowed in the steady breeze. Pi-Ramesses stood to the north, its colonnades pale as bone in the star wash, the chariot stables quiet. To the southeast, Per-Atum's storage walls lifted like low cliffs of packed mud. The night smelled of damp grain and hay and the cool, patient Nile. A heron lifted, slow wings slicing the thin air once, then again. Who hid it first? Merritt asked after a while, still watching the reeds. A frightened clerk, perhaps, I said. Someone who copied words that made his hand shake, who slipped them aside when a shelf cracked and water licked at the lower tier. Someone who knew that hiding is sometimes the only honest thing left to do. You moved them later and saved them from the collapse. She nodded once. The skiff bumped a floating reed mat and slid free. The east wind kept working, but less now, as if satisfied. At the boathouse we ducked under the lintel and into cool shadow. I laid the cedar box on a low plank. The blue wax shone dully, the double knot clear. I touched it with one finger, then let my hand fall away. I am a protector, not a breaker. Quiet is often stronger than assertion. We will not keep it here long, I said. You will copy a docket, brief, true, with a barley roll tally. Hide that among the routine. It is a thread that cannot be burned. And the box? Back to BT1 scene for now, I said. But deeper. Different bricks. A place the flood will clean but not erase. Or somewhere only your feet know. You are the keeper of your own map. She nodded again, that small, focused motion of a scribe measuring a line with her eye. Her fingers, ink-smudged, rested on the lid for a moment. Thank you, she whispered, whoever you are. I am a friend of records, I said, and of sleep. That last word made her smile. Outside, stars thinned toward dawn. The marsh rustled low. The cedar box waited, calm as a held breath. It was enough. The voices in the papyrus were safe. Chapter 10, in which the record survives and dawn is gentle. Dawn in the delta does not shout. It climbs the bricks with a soft hand, and the mud shines a little, and the stables smell more like hay than like sweat. I stood with my back to a lithe column and watched the shape of Per-Atum emerge, tier by tier, as if a careful scribe were drawing it in with light. From across the yard, Hori's ring flashed. He stood before a small brazier, a stack of broken lids at his side, and spoke in a smooth voice to a superior with a heavier collar. False treachery, he said, thin-lipped, almost kindly, like a doctor reporting a fever as passed. A forged seal, a decoy bundle. We have rooted out the ruse. The dignity of Ramesses is untrimmed. He did not know his own seal had smiled up at him from bread paste, nor that the dignity of a throne can survive the truth far better than a lie. He had burned the decoy with ceremony, and the Medjay had nodded and stood down, and the shelf sweep was quiet again. Order for Hori was a liturgy. He performed it with care. Merritt moved through the storeroom with a familiar rhythm. She carried a strip of papyrus cut thin, the hieratic on it neat and narrow. Her reed pen whispered. She wrote a docket that said only what must be said. Date, vault, tier, witness mark, and one short line that could mean three things depending on who read it. She rolled it with a barley tally and tied it with cheap twine. When no one watched, She slid it between two thick sheaves of grain accounts. It vanished the way a drop vanishes into a bucket. She passed me on her way to the shelf map and did not meet my eyes. That was wise. We were 2 grains in a field. That was enough. The cedar box rested where we had settled it for the hour, wrapped again, the wax impression cool. We would return it below the tier when the east wind had finished its work and the water lifted, making entry harder, not easier. The same wind that had brought the path would close it. Sometimes safety and danger share a door. I leaned against a pylon carved with names that outlived the hands that carved them. Pi-Ramesses breathed in the slow, confident rhythm of a city sure of its horses and its god-king. Chariot wheels stood in neat rows. A boy led a dappled mare with a bucket and sang under his breath, a tune without edges. Somewhere, a pot cracked, and someone laughed, and someone else cursed a rat. The world was itself again, full of small tasks and larger stories. Merritt's shadow slid across the floor as she passed into the light and away. I followed in time, not to her, but to the boathouse. The skiff waited, and beyond it, the channel where the reeds leaned and the heron returned to its patient corner. I stepped in and let the skiff rock once, then settle, wood whispering to water. We pushed off. The bow cut a soft V in the brightening surface. The water rose a little as the east wind gentled to a breeze. My hands on the oar were damp but steady. I glanced back once. Ori stood straight as ever, stylus tapping his palm, eyes already scanning a different shelf, already composing a report about nothing and everything. His fear was order's frayed edge. He kept trimming, trimming, trimming. He did not look toward the sluice. He didn't need to, he thought. Good. Let him rest there. As the channel widened, I set the oar on the floorboards. The movements of the skiff and my breath matched. In, out, wood, water. In, out. Reed, air. The big questions had taken their shapes. Who hid the papyrus of the 2 covenants? A scribe with a conscience hid it first. Careless brick and flood forced his hand. And then Merritt hid it again, deeper, under barley and tally and a lock of silence. Where? In Per-Atum, Vault B, back tier 15 BT Elam, behind Menpet's lower bricks, reachable only when an east wind drained the sluice. And why? Because truth asked to be kept, not crushed, because an offer was made and refused, and both words mattered. History does not only belong to the winners of chariot races. It belongs to voices that said no, while standing at the edge of water with dawn behind them. I could have kept the box in my hands and run the skiff into the reeds, stashed it in a dream pocket, and sailed back to my chair with cedar under my arm. That is not how this work goes. The dreamscape teaches, it does not steal. It shows a path and lets me walk it once. In the waking world, we use that path to find the real earth underfoot. I turned the skiff back toward the boathouse. The sun reached the low walls and laid a warm pane of light over the mud bricks. Merritt would be finishing her docket. In a day, perhaps 2, she would move the box with another pair of quiet hands to a deeper place that only she knew how to find. The decoy ash would stick to Hori's sandals and be brushed off without a thought. A memory would be tucked in barley and grow soft around the edges, but not disappear. The heron, tireless statue, lowered its beak, lifted it again, and swallowed. Life went on exactly as it should. I laid one palm flat on the skiff's worn edge and closed my eyes for a moment. The east wind, the wax, the double tie, the word cloud written by an Egyptian hand. These were now a set of keys, quiet and clean. In a few steps, I would return to my chair and my kettle and a flake of blue wax drying on a blotter, and then I would write a note, plain and precise, to Dr. Layla Ben Yosef. I would draw a small map of the Wadi Tumilat with a mark for Per-Atum's old sluice and a tiny knot of lines where a reed bed leaned under an east wind. The skiff bumped the boathouse threshold, and the jolt became the soft nudge of my chair's arm against my elbow. The reed's whisper turned into the kettle's final exhale. My housecoat settled around my knees, wool warm against linen. I opened my eyes to the lamplit study, to the scattered pens and the open notebook, to the faint tea-stained sun on the wooden desk. On the blotter lay the blue wax flake, dried at last. The impression of two tied papyrus stems caught the lamplight. The tiny faint scarab bead, once trapped in wax, had rolled free and rested against the edge like a pale green comma. The clay shard with BT1 sikin sat where I had placed it, a quiet fragment that now read like a sentence. I took up my pen and wrote, "Dear Dr. Ben Yosef, follow the east wind. Per-Atum, Vault B, back tier 17. Look for Menpeta bricks and a drained sluice. If it's dry, wait for wind. Use blue wax impressions. Watch for barley tallies that do not add up to barley. The voices are there. Handle with care." The ink dried in a glossy trail, then dulled. I sealed the note and leaned back. The room held still for a long breath. The case had arrived in rain and ended in a whisper. The tension evaporated completely. Rain began against the window, a soft, even tapping that smoothed the edges of the night. The fire muttered in the grate like an old friend telling the end of a story he knows by heart. I rinsed the reed pen in a dish, drew it out, and shook a single, reluctant drop back into the water. The room smelled gently of tea and paper and the faint sweetness of the resin I had uncorked an hour ago. My chair cupped my shoulders. The study was a warm boat. Outside, the street was quiet. Somewhere a late taxi sighed past, and someone laughed, and the lift in the building's bones slowed to a resting hum. I could hear my own breathing better than the clock. In, out, wood, water, in, out. Reed, air. The rhythm matched the rain. It is a simple thing, the comfort of a solved puzzle. The mind loosens its grip, fingers relax, jaw unhooks, eyes grow heavy because their work is finished. The room explains itself. I did not need to see the clock to know the hour. I did not want to. Time had folded into sound, rain on glass, fire answering, kettle tapping as it cooled. I let my eyes fall to half-mast and looked at the small details that always steady me. The chipped rim of the teacup, the tiny nick in the right arm of the chair where a button caught once last winter, the smooth depression on the desk where my thumb sits when I think. They were little anchors. Even in a storm, a sailor remembers where to place his hands. Even in a quiet room, a detective knows where rest lives. If you are listening, you are safe here. The storm outside is a soft one. The story's edge has rounded. Nothing pursues us. No voice cries, "Search the drain." We have already found what needed finding. We have already felt the seal and read the words and set them back in their cedar bed. There is nothing left to guard except your breath, and the easy rise and fall of your chest. The rain writes in long lines across the night. The fire turns a page and turns another. The desk is warm where my forearms rest, and the chair holds me the way a harbour holds a quiet boat. Beyond the window, the world is wide and wet and sleeping in patches. Here, the world is small and dry and sleeping whole. I could rise and fetch a blanket, but the heaviness in my limbs says it is not needed. The housecoat, the wool, the room, they are blanket enough. My head finds the high place on the cushion without looking. My breath lengthens, then lengthens again. Syllables of old lullabies I once collected in deserts and libraries turn over in the mind, smooth with use. I do not sing them out loud. I do not need to. Their meter is already in the rain. If your eyes close, let them close. If you need one more anchor, picture the double knot in blue wax, simple, clear, holding. Picture the reeds leaning under an east wind, then lifting back up when day comes. Picture a scribe's ink-dark fingers pressing a docket into barley, not to lose it, but to keep it. There are people in every age who choose to save what matters. Tonight, you met two of them. You can sleep among such friends. The kettle ticks once more, then is done. The fire lowers its voice. The window, glazed with rain, keeps the night at a gentle distance. Breath in, breath out. The room is steady as a stone. My eyes close. The chair holds. The story rests. Good night.